Hello everyone. On the previous video, we have talked about the movements of each piece, check, and checkmates. So you should be familiar with basic rules and know how to legally move these pieces. If you don't, you can go back and review the previous lessons. Now, in this lesson, we will discuss the three special movements, and those are promotion, castling, and en passant. If you want to be a good player, you have to understand them very well. Use them in your next game and be a powerful player. The first special move is promotion. This special move is about pawns. Out of 6 pieces in the chess, you may think pawns are the weakest, right? However, sometimes a pawn can be the strongest piece on the board. Pawns have a special ability to become any other chess piece once they reach the other side of the board. Not a king, though. You cannot have 2 kings on the board. Okay, let's see how it works. On this board, it is white's turn, and now the white pawn has got to the other end. It is time for him to choose what to be: a queen, knight, rook, or bishop. Usually, queen would be the best choice since it is the most powerful piece. Also, it is okay to have more than one queen on the board. If you're using actual board, you simply take out the pawn and place the queen to proper place. If the queen is still alive on the board, you can place the rook upside down and say that it is a queen. As I said, it is okay to have more than one queen on the board. Now, I will give you a pop quiz. First one. You're playing as a white, and it is your turn. You decided to promote a pawn to a queen. Select from following options how the board should look like after your turn. A. The white pawn will move forward and promote. B. The white pawn will just promote. C. We haven't got to the end. We will get there this turn, and we will promote next turn. Which one? The answer is A. You don't have to wait for the next turn. Once the pawn gets to the other end, you can promote it to queen right away. Okay, next question. It is white's turn, and this time there's a rook on e8. Can white take the rook and promote? The answer is yes. You can take the black rook and promote it to anything you would like. In this case, he promoted it to a queen. I will give you a last question. This time, you're playing as a black, and you want to promote a pawn. The question is, which piece should the black pawn promote to? The answer is knight, because it is a checkmate if you promote it to a knight. As I said before, generally, you want to promote the pawn to a queen. However, there are some rare situations where you want to promote the pawn to something other than queen, and this is one of them. It is called under promotion to promote the pawn to something other than a queen. So this was promotion. Now do you realize the importance of pawns? They may be weak at first, but if they could survive through the battles and reach the other end, they can be as strong as queen. So do not just think of them as a weak piece and take a good care of them. Now, let me introduce you the second special movement in chess, en passant. This is also about pawns, but unlike promotion, en passant doesn't usually happen in the game. It is because it happens in very limited situations. Before we talk more about it, first let's see how it works. Consider this situation. It is black's turn, and the player wants to move the pawn to f5. Just like this. And this is the situation which en passant can happen. I will describe more about the conditions, but for now, Let's see what will happen. It is white's turn now, and you might think the white pawn can only move forward. However, it has one more option. The white pawn can move to f6, and also it can take the black pawn on f5, just like this. This is the second special movement in chess, en passant. Now, let's go over the conditions. First, your pawn must be on your 5th rank. So, if you're playing as black, your pawn must be on one of those circles. If you're playing as white, your pawn must be in one of those circles, like this. Then, the opponent's pawn must move 2 squares. It has to be 2, and also, the opponent's pawn must be right next to your pawn. For example, if the black moves his pawn to d5 instead of g5, it would not work. The last condition is that you must capture the opponent's pawn right away. Don't wait for the next turn. And the board will look like this after en passant. Did you get it? Okay, now it is the exercise time. Question 1. The white pawn moved from c3 to c4. Using en passant, can black use his pawn on b to capture the opponent's pawn on c? The answer is no. Remember, the opponent's pawn must move 2 squares. In this case, it moved only 1 square. Next question. Consider this situation. The white pawn moved from c2 to c4. Using en passant, can black use his pawn on b to capture the opponent's pawn on c? The answer is yes, and it would look like this after en passant. This was an en passant. Did you understand it? Even if you don't get it, do not worry too much about it. As I said, it doesn't happen very often. Now let's move on to the last special movement. It is called castling. It is a move about king and rook. It is very important. As you already know, the king is the most valuable piece in chess. Even if you have more pieces on the board, if the opponents take your king, you will lose the game. And this is why it is very important to keep the king in safe place. Castling can do this by switching the position of rook and the king. Just like en passant, it has to meet some conditions. But first, let's take a look at this example. Here, it is white's turn, and he will castle the king. Usually, king can move only for 1 square, but by castling, it can move 2 squares to the side. In this case, king moved to c. It is called queenside castling. And this is how it would look like after castling. It moves both king and rook at the same time. Now, let's take a look at kingside castling. It is a more realistic situation. Again, it is white's turn. Just like the previous example, the king can castle and move 2 squares to the side, to g1. After castling, the board would look like this. It is called kingside castling. Just like the other one, the king moves 2 squares and the rook moves to the middle. And it has to be right next to the king. Now, let's go over the conditions for castling. 1. It has to be the first move for both king and rook. 2. Squares between the king and rook has to be empty. 3. The king is not in check. 4. The king does not end up in check. And finally 5. The king does not pass through the square that is in check. Let's go over each one of them one by one. I will give you an example, and together we will walk through these conditions and see if a player can castle or not. Let's consider this situation. Assume that neither king nor rook had moved. Once it moves, even if it moves back to the original position, you cannot castle. First, are the squares between king and rook empty? Well, they're empty, so yes, it meets the condition. Now, is king in check? No, so it meets the condition as well. Next, will king end up in check? Look at the green circle on g1. This is where the king will be. It is not in check, so it meets the condition. Finally, will king pass through a square that is in check? This time, look at circle on f1. Well, it is not in check, so it also meets the condition. Let me ask you again, can the white king castle? The answer is yes. And it would look like this. King moves 2 squares, and the rook shifts to inside. Now, let's go over some problems. Question number 1. Can the black king castle? Assume that this would be the first move for king. The answer is no, and it is because the rook has moved already. Also, if you look at the queen side, there are pieces between king and the rook. I hope it was easy. Now, let's move to the next question. Can the white king castle? Assume that this would be the first move for both king and a rook. The answer is no, because square f1 is in check because the black bishop is on a6. Okay, it is time for the last question. Can the black king castle? The answer is yes. It is the first move for both king and a rook. Nothing is in between the king and rook. And none of these squares are in check. You know how it would look like after castling? It would look like this. Okay, this was castling, the last special move in chess. Now you have mastered all 3 of them. Congratulations! They may be confusing at first, especially if you're new to chess, but don't worry, after several games you will know how they work. It is like bicycle. Remember, practice makes perfect.